I recently went to Politicon, and I have to say it was okay actually, but kind of underwhelming, at least in a certain regard, because I went to a panel on fake news, and probably not a good idea, because many of you who watch me, you may know that I'm actually an expert on fake news, having worked for news organizations and actually studied the phenomenon quite a bit. And I actually know people who work in the production of marketing and fake news. I know quite a bit about the topic. Sitting in the audience watching a panel discuss fake news was a bit mind-numbing when none of them knew what the hell they were even talking about. There's a reason I bring this up when you're looking at a story about Google being biased. And it was because the panel was comprised of 4 progressives, 1 journalist, and 1 conservative. What ends up happening? I don't know if you're fans of Rick and Morty, but you ever see the scene where all the clone Ricks come out? You know, Beth has the thing on her head and then she starts thinking about all these Jerrys, and then all the Jerrys come out and start shaking each other's hands. Maybe you're not a fan of Rick and Morty, but for those that know the reference, you understand what I'm saying. Basically, you can imagine all the progressives on the panel, we're sitting there crossing arms and shaking each other. Oh, yes, you're 100% right. Oh, of course, fake news is only what we say it is. David Brock said, fake news is a purely right-wing phenomenon. Okay, well, it's not. Absolutely not. And then when they asked Roaming Millennial, who was the only conservative to defend her position on what fake news is, she had no one to back her up. And I said, this is a horribly slanted, it's like 90-10, 90% progressive panel. The moderator was Sally Cohn, who was straight up arguing with the panelists and the people asking the questions. Not a fan. There's a reason I bring this up. First of all, fake news is not specifically a right-wing phenomenon. What the left does in terms of fake news is they'll take existing stories, but then sprinkle in things that aren't real because you'll assume they're real because something else is real. It's a very clever gaslighting technique, right? What you do is you point to, let's say there's a rock in the street. You have your iota of truth. You say, wow, look at that rock in the street. Donald Trump put it there. And the people think, he did? I mean, there is a rock in the street. I can't see it. I guess they must be telling the truth. Because you see one piece of truth, you assume they must be telling the truth about everything. And that's how humans function. Because we don't know. We have to choose what to trust. We're more likely to trust something if some part of it seems true. I'll give you a good example. The Daily Beast ran a story claiming that the alt-right framed Antifa activists at a protest at Columbia. How did they know it was the alt-right? They don't. They didn't. They had no confirmation. They literally just said it. But because there was a protest, and because there was something suspicious, the average person's probably just going to assume it's true. Okay. There's a reason why I've been talking about fake news while talking about, Google bias. Because on that panel, someone said, it was David Brock of Media Matters for America, he said that conservatives convinced Facebook they had a problem and were biased against conservatives, and then all of a sudden, yada, yada, yada. You see where I'm going. The reality is, Facebook did have a problem. Facebook was biased against conservatives. We'll read this story first, but let me just show you this. Facebook apologizes over removal of conservative sites' web videos. And this is a new story. Okay? About a year ago, Facebook apologized because they found they literally were biased against conservatives in the trending news topics. I just pulled up a story from about a month ago where Facebook was pulling Prager University's videos. They apologized for it. That's the relevant one. I mean, the most recent one. But don't forget, when they used to do the curated trending section, they would remove conservative news, and they apologized for it. They automated it, and the automation made a problem. Well, now we know, according to USA Today, Google News results favor left-leaning media, report finds. And don't let the left tell you otherwise. I am not here to run defense for the right. That's not the point. The point is, when they're wrong, they're wrong. And one of the things that I comment on almost every day, because I am, to an extent, an expert, is fake news and the production of media. And there's a reason why I left the big companies I worked for. One of the things they do is look, fake news comes from everybody. There's no reason to inherently believe one news organization over another. Now, if you ask me, do I think the Washington Post is likely to be telling the truth over, say, the conservative blogosphere Trump2020.com, I'm probably going to lean towards the Washington Post because they do have a bit of authority in that arena. It doesn't mean each individual article though, is deserving of all of my trust. You've got to prove what you're saying is true. That's why when the New York Times uses anonymous sources, I'm not necessarily going to believe it. But I will give the benefit of the doubt to an established organization over a blog with some, long and hard to understand name. However, at their core, who is inherently trustworthy? That's a personal call. Well, here's the thing. The left likes to claim there's no bias. It's not true. Conservatives are not being censored. Okay, well, censored might be a strong word, but there's a group called All Sides. They're a media technology group. I follow them on Twitter. I think they're actually quite good. They are nonpartisan, which is why they're called All Sides. They say, the report from the media technology group All Sides on Tuesday analyzed Google News' homepage and search engine results from the news page over a 2-week period and determined that news outlets with a left bias were more often prominently displayed. Why is that? It's actually really simple. Is Google censoring conservatives? No. According to the nonpartisan group, they said that most news online and most news consumption is from a left perspective. And so you'll hear a lot of people on the left say, oh my God, there is no liberal media. There is. The conservative media tends to be alternative, small, and digitally shared. And I believe this is a relatively new phenomenon. A lot of people talk about, the media being predominantly liberal. And they're correct in that, nightly comedy shows, all liberals. Like, can you name a conservative nightly comedy show? You probably can't. Some of them, like Fox News has some, but Fox News as a channel is more conservative. Steven Crowder, in my opinion, is the conservative equivalent of someone like Jimmy Kimmel. And I don't mean that, that's probably disrespectful to an extent to Steven Crowder, because Steven Crowder does way more research and investigation, and he has much more journalistic prowess, than someone like Jimmy Kimmel. But they're like late night shows that are live where they have conversations. They're different. But what I'm trying to equate not so much is this, like the talent and the skill, because I certainly think Steven Crowder is epically more talented, more funny, and better at what he does than someone like Jimmy Kimmel. And again, I'm not trying to disparage Jimmy Kimmel either. I think he does what he does, right? I'm just saying Crowder actually will give you the facts. He actually does the research, okay? But the point is, on TV, we don't have that. Crowder's on YouTube, okay? Now, Fox News gets way more views than all these other networks, than many of the other cable networks combined, and that's because there aren't any other networks that are really conservative or strong or influential. CNN and MSNBC and HLN are prominent, but add all of their views up together and Fox still gets better ratings in primetime. However, when it comes to general mainstream consumption, All Sides says that most of it is from a left perspective. What does that mean? Google is not censoring links to conservative sites. It's just not showing them. And this creates a chicken and the egg problem. Okay, you can say it's not censorship, but you have to recognize that if when you search for Donald Trump, Google shows you a link to a left-wing site, you're likely to click the left-wing site, thus increasing the traffic that left-wing site gets and then telling Google this is what you wanted, in which case Google will continue to show left-wing sites. It is a chicken and egg problem. Google isn't actively censoring, but they do need to make sure that you don't see a massive imbalance. The algorithm for Google, look, I don't necessarily know how it works, but the typical understanding is it's designed to give you the most relevant response. If I go on Google right now and say pizza, you know what it's going to show me? It's going to show me the pizza place down the block. It's going to show me the pizza places in my area. That's what I'm looking for. So the problem then is some things are easily specific. If I search auto parts store and it shows me the auto parts stores around me, that's fine. But what if I searched right now for Donald Trump? It's going to say, okay, the most relevant site for Donald Trump would be CNN. Would it? Getting a negative perspective from CNN on Trump might not be the actual accurate thing someone needs to find. You might have to actually have two columns saying Fox and CNN. The problem is, when it comes to politics, we don't know what is true or isn't. We just trust people. When I go to the store and I buy milk, okay, I bring the milk home, I open it up, I smell it and say, smells like milk. I drink it, tastes like milk, it's not sour. I know it works. If the milk is sour, I go back to the store and say, the milk is sour, I'd like a refund. When CNN reports a story saying that Donald Trump is colluding with Russia, I can't smell if that's sour or not. I can question it, and I'll tell you what, when I open milk and I smell it and I'm not sure, I don't drink it. So this works the same thing with news. When I see a story from CNN and I'm not sure I'm going to trust it, it sounds crazy, what do? Well, they didn't pay for it, right? Do I return it? Do I complain? They don't care. The issue with news is that there is no way for the layman to know whether or not the reporting is factually accurate. We just trust them. Could you imagine if you had no idea how to tell if the food you were buying was spoiled and you said, well, I can't tell if it's spoiled, but I'll eat it anyway. You probably wouldn't. If there was no expiration date on a can and the can looked questionable, you'd probably pass. But when it comes to news, we can't do that. We just assume it's true. What ends up happening is Google doesn't know the difference because people don't know the difference. You go to Google, you search for a news story, and you will get a left-wing site. You say, I don't know, looks fine to me, I guess, and you'll consume that, even if it might be spoiled. But then you tell Google, spoiled food is fine. So Google keeps sending you more and more spoiled food. Look, let me get off the spoiled food analogy and just say this. If you search for news and Google sends you to a left-wing site, you click it, all that's going to happen is the algorithm reinforces that people like clicking the left-wing site, and that pushes conservative search results down. And that means people who go to Google will get a left-wing bias. And that means Google has a responsibility as someone feeding information to people to figure this one out. Perhaps the appropriate response is not to create, because Google has news, and they do show you a bunch of different things side by side. Maybe when you search for certain news terms, you should be directed to news immediately. I don't know what the answer is. That might not work either. But Google does have to deal with this. I know people who run businesses where their primary sales come through Google search. When Google changes the algorithm or they fall off the front page, their business ceases to exist. Something we need to fix. Anyway, let's wrap this up. Is Google biased against conservatives? Yes. Not as human beings, but the system they have created, as of right now, is biased against conservatives. That is a fact. I got USA Today here. And let's talk about this. Before I go, many people might say, Tim, there's no left-leaning media. That's a lie too. Wrong. I got this from Politico right here. It says news jobs are increasingly clustered in blue counties. And as we can see, from 2008 to 2016, liberals became the majority of journalism jobs. The jobs were opening up in blue areas, hiring liberals, and media is increasingly being dominated by left-wing personalities. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Don't forget, conservative media gets way more engagement. I can only imagine the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro are sitting pretty and making fat cash because they get 100, as of a couple weeks ago, the Daily Wire had 132 million engagements on their content on Facebook, and the top left-wing source only had 26 million, okay? So even though we can see that media is being dominated by the left and that Google is slanting it, there is still light at the end of the tunnel in that, and I'm not saying I'm favoring conservatives, I'm saying for the balance. The light at the end of the tunnel for me is the balance. It's not perfect, but people engage with conservative content more. And the reason they do is probably because it's harder to get on Google and you're not getting it on TV. Plain and simple. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to get out of here. I'll see you guys tomorrow on the main channel, youtube.com/timcast, starting at 4 p.m. And I'll see you then.